Hello.
Hi.
Hi everyone. Glad to be back for this new stream, 2.12.
So welcome to this 2.12 live stream presentation where we'll cover various subjects. So we'll just start with the new announcements on the plugin updates, the marketplace improvements, and then go over the editor features changes for 2.12. So first of all, the plugin have been made public on GitHub. So all of the plugins are now available on GitHub and open to contributions. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So if you go on the if you go on github.com/PopcornFX, you'll find all of the plugins uploaded on different repositories, but also content example projects available for each engine. So one for UE5 and UE4, one for O3DE, and one for Unity. So they are uploaded in separate repositories. The plugins are open for contributions, so we are switching to this model now. The code itself for the plugins is available under the community license. It can be used for free by anyone, no string attached. And yeah, you can share it with your company or external members of the community as long as it complies with community license terms, basically. If you are a studio with specific needs, you can still opt for a commercial license for it. In addition, the editor, PopcornFX editor license has been improved a little bit. So we have a new perpetual license and also a new royalty-based license. So if you don't want to license a monthly based subscription, you can choose the royalty-based approach, if that makes sense for you. Just a little more info. If you go on the plugins page of the documentation, you'll find a little bit information on what we mean by opening the plugins for contributions and just the community license link. So that's all for the GitHub announcements and marketplace. So Julien, if you want to explain the marketplace.
The new marketplace. So I will start up the editor. So on the marketplace tab, this was previously the online packages. We renamed it to marketplace to better fit what this is going to become in the near future. So first big change that's immediately visible is that you can now click on the packages and you will be able to see all the contents. So here you have a tree view with all the files that are in the packages, and you see all the assets here, the sizes, the animated thumbnails. You can preview the textures, so it's a pretty nice way to have a better idea of what you're getting in the package before you download it. You also have shortcuts to import and create a new project from the package. So the bigger change that has happened is that now some of the packages we will upload will be accessible only to indie studios or licenses or above. And this is a first step to publish later on paid packages and to, in the longer term, open the package uploads to the community so that you can either upload free packages or paying packages that people can purchase. Right now we don't have the paying system in place. It's in progress, but the first step and easiest step to start on this was to add a license-based access. So if you have the personal free license, you have access to all the free packages, and you will see some grayed out packages that are only downloadable if you have an indie license or above. So right now, none are uploaded, but some will come in the upcoming weeks. We have an FPS package that's done already. Just needs some reviewing before being uploaded, and there is a racing package in the works that will come later on as well. And of course, we will also keep uploading free content. Our goal is not to make this a paywall for popcorn content. It's that everyone, even the community licenses, can get working effects that they can use in their projects, but we also want ultimately, as I said, to allow people to sell their packages. So yeah, this is what this tab here will become in the future. Did I forget something? Oh yeah, the new project. Also on the Vault tab, what I showed you with the package details also works on the Vault tab. So here, when you double click on a package, you also see the same thing. We improved the new project creation dialog that you can either access from here by creating a new project, or from here, for example, when I create new project from a package, or right click, create new project. So here you have project settings preset, and you can choose either from package or a few presets here. And if I pick default, you will be able to set up all the project paths at this stage. And previously, in the previous editor versions, it was quite painful to do that once the project was created, and you had no way to do it when creating it. So it was a really painful process for studios that wanted to customize those paths. So now it should be way easier. When you create a new project, you can set up all that, and things will work nicely afterwards. Ultimately, we'd like to have a kind of a remap paths tool. Once you already have an existing project that can remap properly the paths in that project, but it's not done yet. So as an intermediate step, you can use that now since 2.12. And I will let... oh, no, I have the auto-generated thumbnails. And it is already opened.
Nope.
Nope. So now in 2.12 we added a small feature which can be handy. We auto-generate thumbnails for audio files. So if you are using audio files in your effects, this is a neat way to quickly preview them in the content browser. We stole an ID from Audacity, I think, regarding those red lines. These just show the places in the audio file where the audio volume saturates. So that's what those red lines are. You can disable them in the settings, and control. You have a few controls over that in the editor settings. And now it's your turn.
Okay. So now I will go over a few editor features we added and editor workflow improvements. Maybe we can just put that's what I wanted to do. In case of if we have questions, we will be able to see those. So let's go to particles of another project. I think I was okay. So the first improvement that has been done is the editing of 3D curves inside the viewport. So before, 3D curves were tweakable from this menu as color, for example, or values here. It's a bit painful if you use it as a curve for position sampling. So now, if you select this and this icon on top of the viewport, you can display that curve and pick control points. You also need to have your gizmo settings to translate or rotate here. Use W for the shortcut. And I can move this point. The tangent will be also settable from the orientation of the control point.
Yeah, and you can see that it updates the curve. If you open the curve node, you should see the control points move.
Exactly. So yeah, it's a nice handy improvement. Another UX improvement that has been done is in that now I'll go. Yeah, maybe I'll go on another effect first to show you this. Let's open this effect. I will explain a bit later what this effect does. But a nice thing to note is that we now display constant value over every constant node. For example, here I have this value. If I drag it and create a float for constant node, I have this on top of it. So it's a small quality of life feature. Another improvement that has been done is that before you had to, so if you want to pick your material in a renderer, you had to go there and to find this specific material, and you could pick unmatching material, meaning that in a billboard renderer you were able to pick, let's say, a ribbon material, and it would not work. So now it's filtering those and it's targeting only relevant materials. So here I have all the billboard compatible materials from my package showing, and same if I create a ribbon render and check here, we have only 3 different ribbon compatible material here. A fix also in this new version is that hovering on event wire is now more reliable. It was something that partially worked in the last versions, but it was not fully properly implemented. And now you can see that all those payloads in this event are visible when I hover on this event wire.
Yeah, there were a bunch of cases where it worked, but most cases displayed either wrong information or did not show anything at all. So.
Some new feature that we worked on in this version is the possibility to bind render targets to particle texture samplers. So in this effect, for example, you can see particle spawning from the mesh. So it's something that we could do already before. The difference here, if I look at the diffuse buffer of the opaque geometry, is that we sample this texture and not the mesh texture. So here I have my render target that is used here down in the graph. By default it will sample this texture, but I can also pick editor render target and pick one of those texture used by the rendering pipeline. So for example, I was using color, which is something that you could do with the mesh UV and the mesh diffuse. So here it's not very impressive, but I can also pick post merge, for example, and here it's picking the full lit color. So the actual screen color after applying all the PBR functions to have the final lighting. So it's rather handy. Right now we are using GPU particles, so it's directly sampling the target that is used by the pipeline. But if I switch that to CPU rendering, it will do a read back to CPU, so it will also work. In your final engine, you have to bind specific target assets from your pipeline to this render target sampler, attribute sampler. And I think that's it for me. We have similar GPU rendering stuff feature to present, and I will let Hugo present those.
Yeah, so an alternative to using texture attribute samplers is we now have low-level G-buffer sampling accessors for the currently depth and normal maps. So it's another way to retrieve data from the G-buffer sampling, and it's only supported on a GPU. So here in this example, so the albedo color or the post-merge, what is used to color the billboards is sampled using the technique Paul just showed, but the velocity of each particle once it spawns on the mesh surface is determined by a G-buffer sampling template, simulation interface. Another use case of that is depth-based collisions. So you can see this effect, we have GPU simulated particles and they have collisions enabled. So we introduced that method on the physics node. When you have collisions enabled, you can now specify a new type of primitive that you collide with. Previously, you had only scene and shape. So scene was CPU collisions, shape was just a static shape, and depth is the new method introduced. So the way it works internally, if I open up the node graph details panel and show the backend tab, so the backend tab is what will display what is executed under the hood for this particular layer. So in this example, we have so D3D12 GPU simulation. If I dig into the physics node, into the collision template, you can see the depth collide, collision send depth, depth intersect, and under the hood, what it does is basically each particle will do its collision based on raycast, basically. Yeah. So at the very end of the backend tab, you can see the main compute shader. So we'll see. So this is the main entry point. Yeah, maybe you want to show, Julien.
No, go ahead. Yeah, just the highlight.
Yeah,
is
so if I
find where
hover
you
the, yeah, sorry if it's a bit not very clear the way I present it. So the depth collide, when you hover it, it will currently display all of the instructions, and you can see highlighted here the gbuffer project to position and gbuffer project to normal. Those are the actual simulation interfaces overridden for the GPU simulation. So if I dig a bit more into it to see what those instructions are doing, so we have the depth intersect template, and at the lowest level, the depth intersect template, it takes as input array start, array direction, and array length, and those are used to basically just sample the depth buffer and the normal buffer and do some basic point array plane collision detection, intersection detection. So that's one of the use cases.
And so these are not just some magic built-in function calls. It's
yeah, the point to expose it like that is to have low-level accessors. The depth-based collisions is just one way of using those data, but we could expose later on samples the albedo, like the previous example Paul showed. So it can be used for a wide variety of things. To achieve that, we have had to stabilize a lot the GPU simulation, improve performance quite a bit. So it's a first milestone for us to achieve this step specifically for advanced type of FX.
And the interesting thing here, in case some people don't know what sim interfaces are, is that all that code is basically custom code. So when you integrate Popcorn in your engine, you can define what those functions do. And so here, this simulation interface and this function call is actually defined so here by the editor, because we're in the editor, but it's defined a bit above, like here, for example, project to normal. So that's the implementation, and when you integrate Popcorn in your engine, you specify that compute shader snippet to sample your own buffers, and it just gets injected inside the particle layer and compiled with the rest. And so it's a pretty powerful way for you to inject custom code in there.
So I forgot to mention that by default this feature is disabled, so you have to open up the editor properties. It's per project, so if you go under project settings, features, you have to enable that for it to work. And what this setting does, it just exposes you those two low-level nodes and make the depth-based collisions actually work. Another type of use case of those functions is, for example, just projecting particles on the depth map. So it's not very good-looking effect, but
it's programmer art.
Yeah, just rising particles going upwards and projected. So if I show the layer, it's more interesting. So particles are spawned on a VRAND, some velocity, and then each frame it's projected the world position onto the depths and using the sample normal to color the viewport. And finally, another thing that was introduced in 2.12 is a GPU debugger. So if you ever used the CPU particle debugger, it's when you pause the simulation, you select some particles and you see some values. So we just added the same functionality for the GPU simulated particles. If you try it out, so you have to pause, select some particles, the first thing you will see is that the viewport will freeze for a few seconds. That's something we want to improve. Basically we check the node graph, all of those functions, the final compute shader. We augment it with extra instructions which allow us to actually get those value back from the GPU. And sometimes the compilation command lines just time out. So you can edit that setting in the editor preferences. If you go under effect editor, so backend compiler here, you see command line timeout in seconds. So just crank that up to 5,000, so 5 seconds, and it will work. If you select some particles in an effect and you still see nothing despite that, it's just that we have an internal error, so there's most likely nothing you can do about it. It's a bug in our code, but it's a first initial version working for a good amount of effects, so you can try it out. So basically, in this example, I have 3 particles. You can see, for example, the safe.life ratio displayed above here, and the up axis value displayed here. If you selected several particles, you can switch using the next and previous values here. So same as CPU sim, basically. Yeah, so that's all for the GPU sim. Trying to think if I forgot something. Yeah, final comment regarding the GPU sim in general. By default, in the editor properties, it's disabled for D3D11. So if you don't have a graphics card that supports D3D12, by default, no GPU sim will run in the editor. So just enable that. Otherwise it will not work. And finally, if you see that an effect is supposed to spawn GPU particles, but for some reason you only see CPU particles, we have an issue currently we are trying to address. Just hit that force recompile button, and in most of the case it fixes the problem, but we will fix it soon. So that's it for the
that's all.
GPU improvements. Do we have any
no question.
If you have any questions about any of that or anything else, we'd be happy to answer. And yeah.
Otherwise, don't hesitate to join us on Discord if you're not there. We try to answer and to help you in a more informal context. So.
Yes, and yeah, I wanted to say something.
Yeah, the whole team is on the Discord server, so the artists are there as well. Yeah, we try to help people out if they ask about things.
Yeah.
You have direct access to the PopcornFX artists and developers to join the Discord. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, if there are no questions, we'll wrap it up. And if you watch this after. Offline and have questions, as Paul said, drop in our Discord and feel free to ask anything.
Goodbye.
Well, thanks guys.
Ciao.
Bye bye.